Good morning, everyone. My name is Carrie Craig, and I am your host this morning. It is a pleasure to have you participate on today's webinar, COVID-19, Leadership in Times of Stress, Team Leadership. Before I turn over the webinar to Prosperity Indiana's Executive Director, I want to mention a few housekeeping items. Please be aware that all audio is muted. If you would like to ask a question, there are two ways to do so. You can use the raised hand icon on your screen. We will unmute your line and you may ask your question or questions. You can always type your question or questions in the Q&A box, which is located on your screen. We all know that technology can be trying these days, especially while working from home. So if you lose your connection, you may also reconnect using the link emailed to you. And finally, after today's webinar, you can find both the presentation and recording available on our COVID-19 Resources Hub located in the member portal. And now I wish to turn it over to Jessica Love, Prosperity Indiana's Executive Director, for some opening remarks. Jessica?
Thank you, Carrie, and thank you to everyone joining the webinar today. I am Jessica Love, Executive Director for Prosperity Indiana, and as we embark on week 10 of working from home, I'll admit I'm sometimes finding team leadership harder instead of easier than in week 1. And I also know that while we're all experiencing the same pandemic, we are not experiencing it in exactly the same way, and that goes for everyone on all of our teams, including ourselves. And, you know, it's definitely harder to engage others, and forgive the pun, but it's harder to cut through masks that people might put on. And so, you know, I'm thankful to again have my executive coach, Erin Slater, here to help walk us through creating our individual solutions to leading all of our teams. And in that vein, I must say I am really grateful for our team members who in many ways are working harder than ever these days. We also appreciate Fifth Third Bank for supporting our work. They're Strengthening Our Communities grant, which is enabling our COVID-19 capacity building efforts. And I would now like to introduce and welcome again Jadira Hoptree with Fifth Third Bank. Jadira serves as Vice President and Community Economic Development Manager for Fifth Third Bank Indiana region, overseeing the charitable giving process, deploying Fifth Third Foundation grants, as well as lending and economic development programs for underserved communities all across the state. So Jadira, good morning.
Good morning, Jessica, and good morning, everyone. Happy Monday. I'm not sure where you're calling from, but here from Indy, it's a little bit rainy outside, which is nice. We had a good weekend. I wanted to thank you again, Jessica, and thank the Prosperity Indiana team and the presenters today for taking your time and to keep us informed and giving us those tips that are so important on these days. These webinars continue to be the best way to start my week. At Fifth Third, we continue to support, learn, and grow with our community. This week is a new start for Fifth Third as we start working with our non-for-profit and small business customers with the forgiveness of the PPP or P3 loan applications. If you applied for this loan, please work with your banker or the organization that you applied through, because the forgiveness application starts to be completed soon and is due 60 days from when you receive the funding. To this point, Jessica, it's more important than ever to have leadership and new ways to lead the team when you are working remotely. So I totally understand the importance of webinars like this for everybody, non-for-profit, agencies, and for us in the banking industry as well. With that in mind, we are starting to offering a small business webinars, a series also in partnership with Accion, in addition to this webinars that we're offering. For more information, don't hesitate to reach out to Prosperity Indiana or myself for instructions on those. We, as I mentioned before, are very interested on offering localized webinars and virtual education. So if anybody's interested on bringing some free financial empowerment and credit management through virtually to your communities, don't hesitate to contact us as well. In summary, I think I have mentioned it through these past 10 weeks. We are committed to inclusive economic mobility, and we will continue to stay to stay present and learn from you and respond to the challenges ahead for all of us. Again, thank you, Prosperity Indiana, for leading the way on the communication with the team. Thank you, everyone, and have a great week. With that, Carrie, I take it back to you.
Thank you, Jadira. And thank you to our partners at Fifth Third Bank for making today's webinar possible. And now I'm going to provide a bit of a snapshot of who we are at Prosperity Indiana, in case those of you who are with us today don't know us. Since its founding in 1986, Prosperity Indiana has mobilized hundreds of members and thousands of people to create economic opportunities and improve social conditions, particularly for those who are most disadvantaged. Prosperity Indiana is a statewide intermediary organization with a local focus. We have member organizations that strengthen communities and improve lives in rural, suburban, and urban areas in all of Indiana's 92 counties. Members provide housing opportunity, they meet basic needs, they connect Hoosiers to jobs, they create vital places, they do all of this and more. The mission of Prosperity Indiana is to build a better future for our communities by providing advocacy, leveraging resources, and engaging an empowered network of members to create inclusive opportunities that build assets and improve lives. And finally, we do all of this through in four ways: through our resources, such as delivering training, direct technical assistance, and financial support to organizations, people, and neighborhoods; through engagement, bringing residents and practitioners to learn and support each other; advocacy, advocating for policies that support member work and keeping members informed of policy at the state and national level; and finally, through our signature programs. And now I'd like to take a moment to introduce our speaker for this morning. Erin Slater is a former nonprofit CEO turned certified professional coach. Passionate about coaching, she founded Intentional Coaching and Consulting in 2014 to serve leaders and their teams. She partners with clients to create clarity and focus while enhancing leadership and self-awareness. Clients report feeling more content and fulfilled in many aspects of their lives as a result of coaching, workshops, and training. Erin is credentialed through the International Coach Federation and received both her professional coach and energy leadership certifications through the Institute for Professional Excellence in Coaching. Her specialty is helping nonprofit leaders excel in their roles while loving their lives. Erin?
Good morning, Carrie. Thank you and the Prosperity Indiana team for having me, and thanks to Fifth Third for the sponsorship. But most importantly, I really want to thank every single person here this morning for taking time from your busy day and your busy week to be here. Let me just take a second and get my screen set up for you. Carrie, are we set? Can you see this?
Yes, we can. We're ready to go.
All right, perfect. Well, I always just like to begin by saying, especially in these times, that I hope that you and your families and your teams are safe and healthy and strong. It's an absolute privilege to serve you today by talking about team leadership in times of stress. I also like to begin, especially online web-based education sessions, by talking for a minute about how we can set ourselves up for success today. So take a second and think to yourself how you would answer this question. On a scale of 1 to 10, how committed are you to being fully present today? If you're like most people, and you're being totally honest, you might say a 6 or a 7, or maybe my overachievers might say an 8 or a 9. But take a minute and look at the number that you picked, and then explore what it would take to get that 1 or 2 numbers higher. For some of us, it might be putting our phone in a different room, or shutting our phone off, or closing other browsers, or even just going to get a cup of coffee. So I really just encourage you to take a moment to do the things that you need to do so that you can feel like you can be fully present with me today. The session that I put together for you is full of practical applications, a lot of questions that you can use with your team, and also tools that you can begin to use immediately. The content that we have today doesn't really lend itself to polls and constant interaction. That said, as Carrie shared, you can ask questions anytime, and I'm going to pause a few times asking you for individuals to come live and share their thoughts and feedback. Your engagement during this time is greatly appreciated, and it adds tremendous value to the experience. And then at the end, I'll do my best to also make sure that I leave some time for questions. Okay, so finally, if you were to get everything that you wanted and needed out of this session today, what would that be? What is it that each of you as leaders most need right now? And I encourage you to jot that down on your notepad and then set that as your intention as we begin so that you can keep that at the forefront during our time together. When we think about leadership in times of stress, there's many subtopics that we can address. So that's why we're conducting a series where we can delve into the multifaceted topics of leadership, especially during these difficult times. Our last session was about focusing on what matters most and connected back to self-leadership. And today we really want to honor what it is that our teams need from us as leaders and focus on the team aspect of leadership. My hope is that as you listen to this, some of the concepts are going to affirm what you're already doing. Some of them are going to remind you of things you already knew that you may have forgotten to implement lately because of stress, and others will provide a handful of aha moments for you. Right now, I always like to begin my education sessions by talking about what's happening in our brains. For those of you who attended the self-leadership session, this small piece will be a refresher. Yet I want to introduce this topic again because it's important for us to be aware of this, not only through the lens of ourselves as leaders and what's happening in our own brains, but also for us to better understand what it is that's happening in the brains of our team members as well. So when things are normal for us, our prefrontal cortex takes the driver's seat, which releases good hormones and makes us feel good. And when we feel good and these hormones are being released, it helps our bodies with digestion, with decision making, with emotional regulation and social behavior. But when we're in our stress reaction, which we all are right now as a result of this global pandemic, our primitive brain or our amygdala takes the wheel, and it sounds these smoke alarms, allowing our stress hormones to be released almost constantly, making us afraid and also to feel threatened. So what do threats do? They make us retreat, and then we feel like we need to protect ourselves. So we end up in either fight, flight, or freeze mode. So being in this stressed state affects our decision-making ability, and we're not able to focus. So it's important to remember, especially when interacting with our teams, that no one is our normal self right now. That being said, our stress reaction creates many of the triggers, experiences, and outcomes that you see here on the left of the slide, which is the fight, flight, or our sympathetic response. One predominant way that struggles show up, particularly in a team environment, is in the form of worrying. Worrying about what our fears are that are coming up, insecurities, what we don't have enough of, or about maybe even comparing ourselves to everyone else and how they're responding right now. So it's really important to remember the concept of assuming positive intent. Most of us typically start by assuming positive intent, but right now people are getting tired and stressed, and it makes it difficult to keep this top of mind. For example, we might perceive that someone on our team is really annoying right now because they're all of a sudden asking us a ton of questions. But think about this list and imagine what's happening in their brain and consider the idea that maybe they might be scared. Maybe they might need some reassurance or compassion or comfort, or maybe just redirection. Other behaviors that might have formerly been viewed as poor performance that might now actually be indicating that your team members are struggling include checking out, slow response rates, apathy, overwhelm, or kind of on the flip side, we're also seeing this panic working or frenetic work that's not productive. So as leaders, we need to come alongside our team in times of stress and model positive responses, those on the right, and demonstrate those behaviors on the right, such as curiosity and trust and safety and compassion. What you see on the slide now is a filter that provides a great tool that you can use with your team related to worrying. So when we worry, it triggers a chain reaction of thoughts, which can progress in increasing catastrophic and unlikely directions. Our job as leaders is not to hypothetically debate. Our job as leaders is to solve real problems. And there's a difference between real problems and hypothetical worries. So hypothetical worries about the current health crisis might include thinking about worst case scenarios, what we might call as catastrophizing. And then real problem worries are about actual problems that need solutions right now. Given the very real concern about the virus at the moment, of course, there are some helpful solutions that we can implement. Regular hand washing, social distancing, physical isolation. That's an example related to the virus right now, but imagine the worries, hypothetical worries and real problem worries that are happening for your employees and your team members within their jobs. So using this as a filter and educating the team about how to discern, is this a hypothetical worry or a real problem worry, through asking questions and seeking to understand, will help you to support them better. This decision tree is a super helpful tool that can help you and your team understand what are real problems versus hypothetical worries. I have a lot of frontline clients and some who are also in the medical profession who use this tool quite a bit right now. It's simple and it's useful. And the common theme of it has to do with what can you actually control or take action on, which we talked about in the last series. Through the lens of control, what you can control and self-leadership. So this tree allows you to look at your worry through the lens of, if you can't do anything about it and you have no control over the situation, then your efforts to worry are both unproductive and exhausting. So walking through this tool can help you discern, okay, what am I worrying about? Can I do anything about it? What are the options of things that I can do? It can help you determine if you can do anything right now, and if not, it allows you to give yourself permission to let the worry go. These slides will be posted so that you can have a copy of this through the slide deck if you'd like, and if it would serve you after the presentation. Okay, so we're all dealing with a lot right now, and everyone is experiencing at least a little bit of fear. With the fight-flight part of our brain that's being activated, especially more than usual right now, we're all at risk for reacting rather than responding. If you find yourself exploding over minor mistakes, being easily annoyed at others in a meeting, or obsessing over what could go wrong, it's time to focus on your own self-care and then in turn model it to your team. I put together a list of 4 tools that can be modeled by leaders and passed along to share with your teams. And after I share them, I'd like to pause and hear some of the ways that you are modeling self-care to your teams or ways that you're taking care of yourself. The first one is called boxed breathing. And this is an exercise, it was actually popularized by Navy SEALs, where you breathe in on a count of 4, hold on a count of 4, release on a count of 4, and hold on a count of 4. This is a great tool because it can be done silently during a meeting, and it's always available to you. This right here is one of the easiest ways to biochemically shift your body from fight flight to rest repose. You can also download Headspace, Insight Timer, or another meditation app. The #1 complaint I hear from clients is that they don't have time to meditate. But keep in mind that Insight Timer and Headspace offer as short as a 3-minute guided meditation on demand. So these are great to listen to before a meeting or on a break throughout the day, or even before bed to help deepen sleep and calm your thoughts from the day. Performing a personal energy audit is a great way to see where it is that you'll get the greatest impact for your self-care effort. In the book, Everyone Deserves a Great Manager, which is my #1 recommended management book right now, Scott Miller has a full assessment that you and your team can take to determine where it is that you might need more care. I've summarized a few questions on this slide related to sleep, lifestyle, connections, movement, and nutrition. But if you purchase the book, you can see the full assessment and replicate it with your team. Another easy way to cultivate the rest repose mode in our brains is through gratitude. And I have loads of clients who enjoy the 5-minute journal, which is, it only takes 2.5 minutes at the start and the end of each day, which is great because everyone's busy and no one feels like they have time to journal. So the prompts help you to foster gratitude and to honor positivity by asking, what is it that's going to make today great? What am I grateful for? And what amazing things happened today? Or at the very end, what could I have done to make things better? I'd love to pause for a minute and allow a few people to come live to share how you are modeling self-care to your teams and or how you're taking care of yourself right now. Carrie, can you help me see if anybody is willing to come live? In what ways are you modeling self-care for your teams or taking care of yourself right now?
This is Megan McClellan, and we do a weekly staff meeting. And at the beginning of each staff meeting, we go around the table. Lucky for us, there's only 4 of us, and we all do pies, which we talk about our physical, intellectual, emotional, and spiritual or social health and how we're feeling. And usually it's on a red, yellow, green, and you can just say, I'm green today, and leave it at that. Or you could expand on that if you want. Some people like to tell us everything that's going on, and some people are just like, yeah, I'm sort of feeling yellow, but I think that's all I want to say about it. And you just let them go with that. But it's a nice opportunity to check in on the staff in a more personal way while still letting them explain, explain at their level what they want to say.
That's awesome.
And then on a personal note, I have a 7-year-old, actually she just turned 8, an 8-year-old, and before bedtime every night, we're not a very religious family, so we don't do prayers, but instead we always say what we're grateful for that day as sort of a way to help her calm down before bed.
Megan, thank you so much. Those are 2 awesome examples, both personally and professionally. So I love the sharing aspect because we can all take ideas from one another. So thanks for coming live. Anybody else want to share?
We have someone here who Couple of things. Mark Fiddler said, following stay-at-home orders, not spreading the virus. Tessie Molina suggested, I'm not really doing a great job of self-care except share a morning devotional that may hit home to the stress being felt occasionally, and a weekly devotional to our entire staff. And she also said a self-care thing that has actually been very helpful is through the motivation by my 10-year-old son to go walking.
Nice, nice. I love that. So what I like to say about this is I work with about 80% of my clients are nonprofit leaders, and all of us come to the nonprofit field because we want to serve and we want to help. And there's this interesting thing that happens when we give and don't take care of our own needs and don't get our own needs met. We actually go from being super compassionate to being angry and resentful. And it's really, really important all the time to take care of yourself, but even more so right now. And there's the aspect as a team leader that not only do you owe that to yourself to make sure that you're being the best leader you can be, but also modeling this for your team so that you're giving them permission to do the same. Okay, thank you to everyone for sharing. Okay, so what else do teams need from their leaders in times of stress? Inspiration, of course, right? And as a leader, you're probably already really good at this, but it's worth remembering and revisiting some basics during these unprecedented times, because when we're stressed, we completely forget the basics. So here's some tips for modeling inspiration to the whole team broadly. Keep the organization mission and team purpose front and center. So are we sharing mission moments at every meeting? Are we telling stories of impact? Are we talking about our why? We also have the opportunity to open meetings with something funny or humorous or inspirational, and then to share what it personally means to us. So that gives us the time to be vulnerable and authentic. So share a quote about fear or courage and talk about how it resonates with you and why it resonates right now. We also want to offer brief but regular and rhythmic communications. So we want to be updating our team even if there's no update. Transparency through frequent updates is the ultimate expression of good faith, empathy, inspiration, and genuine concern for the team. Many of those worries that they have can be quelled by your communication, transparency, and clarity. Feel free to say things like, here's what we know, here's what we don't. And then finally, we have an opportunity to inspire the team by outlining what our wins are going to look like in short-term sprints. And I'm talking like 1 week, 4 weeks. We don't know what's going to happen in 6 months or even in the next quarter. So dial it back into bite-sized sprints so that you can more effectively predict and manage what's happening. Here's some practical questions that you can use with your team immediately to keep inspiration alive around their priorities. So just, once you outline your sprint, what are our team's top 3 priorities for the next sprint? Why are these important to you? What excites you most about them? And how will we celebrate when we accomplish them? So we also want to model inspiration individually. So we talked about how to model it broadly, but even though we're supporting a team of many people, it's important to take time to show care and concern in a customized manner. How do your people like to be communicated with? Are they introverts or extroverts? Sensitive or direct? Will they respond to stories or data? Right now, more than ever, it's important to demonstrate your faith in their abilities. Even if you think that your team knows that you believe in them, say it. I am confident that you are the right person to do this right now, and I believe in your abilities to get us through. Every single person needs to hear this right now. And finally, if you haven't already, make it crystal clear to your team members that their well-being is your chief concern. So here's a couple ways to do that. One way to do that is to continually gauge stress and engagement levels. I love the dashboard that Megan talked about. Here's another possibility for you to explore as well. You can send scaling questions out in advance of your team meetings or your one-on-one meetings. You can ask them to rate the level of stress, their current confidence in their own abilities, their comfort level right now with telecommuting, which probably changes day to day, and their overall engagement. Another set of questions that can be useful is any or some combination of those at the bottom of the slide. You know, what's one thing I can do to make your week better? What additional support do you need right now? How can I support you with other life and family obligations that you have happening right now? These questions will allow you to be more meaningfully connected with your team. It will also allow you to open a dialogue and explore what their needs are while inspiring them to be their best. The point here is that people are processing stress in different ways, like Jessica said, and at different speeds. So listen closely and try to meet every person where they're at. Right now, our intuitive or impressionistic sense of each person might be wrong. It might be off because of stress. So asking questions and getting quantitative responses can help you to lead them better. I want to talk for a second about expectations. I think there's a pretty common team mindset that we tell people what to do and we tell them or work with them to get it done. There is a better way, and a more effective mindset, particularly right now, is helping team members to get clear about the why behind the what, and then support them in the how. So during this time of isolation and quarantine and remote work, clarity around our team's why and what become absolutely essential to support motivation and commitment to work. So what does that mean for us as leaders? Well, we need to shift from being so much in the process to trusting our team with the process. This allows us to then shift to focus on the outcomes. So to do this, we need to work really hard on letting go of the when and the how the tasks are accomplished and focus more on the results and the outcomes rather than the process. So here's some practical applications. You know, if you've already determined your wins in short-term sprints, now you can publish a monthly calendar of project deadlines with anticipated outcomes. Expectations, they always bite us in the rear. And a lot of times leaders get a bad rap for not setting clear expectations up front. So right now, especially, there's no way that you can possibly anticipate all the expectations for a project or an assignment up front. So ask your team to share that responsibility and put the onus on them to be responsible for clarifying what they need to understand what the expectations are of their projects. If everyone is responsible for getting their own needs met, it distributes the pressure a little bit more evenly and takes that a little bit off of your shoulders. And then finally, of course, we're going to ask for weekly status updates to the calendar. So here's some practical questions that you can use each week as you're, either meeting with them or if you're asking for status updates. So what are the barriers that you anticipate during this sprint? What resources and support do you need to be successful? And then the other one that I love, and this was taken from an example given by Brene Brown, but when you're mapping out expectations, ask your team member to paint done with you. What will this look like when we're finished? Well, I think it's going to look like this, this, and this. Oh, I didn't quite see it that way. I also saw this. So together you're coming together to clarify the expectations. and your team member can then be responsible for getting their own needs met about that. I put this slide together because I think it's super important to talk about optimism. So as leaders, we are all likely optimistic people when things are normal for us. But in times of stress, we all slide a bit from the description on the left to the description on the right. And we really, really have an opportunity and a responsibility to check ourselves here. Leaders who demonstrate hopefulness and confidence in the future are better able to help their team members find meaning and purpose in their work, especially under stressful conditions. Remember, fear freezes initiative, ties up creativity, and yields compliance instead of commitment. So practice framing your own thinking from pessimistic to optimistic and help your team consider the areas that they may want and need to reframe as well. Here's some examples of some of my favorite reframes. So are we as a team expecting the worst possible outcomes? How can we reframe to expect the best possible outcomes? Are we focused on what's wrong and the problems that we're experiencing? Or are we identifying what's right and focusing on the solutions? See how the energy feels different just with the language that we're using and that slight reframe. Is our attitude such that we're avoiding or staying away from things? Or are we moving towards and forward towards something? This is a slide also that you can take and share with your team, offering them a chance as a group or individually about where they're at and where they want to be on the list and asking them how you can help them to get there. Winston Churchill has a great quote on this. A pessimist sees the difficulty in every opportunity, and an optimist sees the opportunity in every difficulty. Okay, I think I'd be remiss if I didn't spend a little bit of time talking about remote meeting success strategies. So I'd like to share what some of my clients are doing and others that I see out there in the field. And then I'd like to open it up again here to see what is working for you and how are you adapting in ways for remote work. So this shift to remote work has changed the nature of our workday, likely forever. And as we navigate through new tasks and different boundaries, we're seeing more meetings on our calendars that's adding stress and also sometimes detracting from our productivity. We've all been there, right? We see a mysterious meeting pop up on our calendar with no explanation, no agenda, no stated goal. And then we might be sitting through a meeting that we don't really need to be a part of. Or we might reach the end of a meeting-filled day and realize that we haven't really done anything. The reality is right now that eliminating or minimizing meetings from our calendar can actually help us communicate better and work more efficiently. One way to do this is through block scheduling and identifying the times of the week that you will be strategic and forward thinking, highly productive with meetings, both internal or external, and then also head down in administrative work, email, or minutia. Time blocking will allow you to have blocks of meetings, and it will also allow you for recovery too. So ideally, you would set the tone of this and your team would mirror your workflow or something similar to your workflow. Make sure you communicate with them so that there's an understanding that you might not accept the invitation depending on what's on your plate that week, and discuss the importance with your team of recovery time and how it helps us to show up engaged and effective. When you prioritize boundaries and recovery time, others begin to recognize the benefit and allow for recovery time themselves. Some of my clients and organizations that I've worked with have found value in creating meeting rules during this time. Here's a couple examples to consider. There's not really a right or wrong. It's about kind of being creative and coming up with what it is that your organization needs right now. Nearly everyone's having some kind of regular all hands on huddles with some frequency or regularity. And they vary. Sometimes it's a quick 5-minute check-in, sometimes it's an hour once a week. It just depends on the needs of your organization. Some have instituted a no more than a certain number of video meetings in a day rule. And some have even identified 1 day a week where there are no meetings to just allow everyone to really focus on priority work and recovery. Initially throughout this, we were seeing a lot of organizations require video on in effort to really increase participation and engagement. And now we're feeling a little bit of video fatigue. So many organizations are starting to either opt for some phone meetings or offering choice with the videos. Do you want to do a phone call? Do you want to do a video? And I think it is important to recognize that Zoom fatigue, it's partly resulting because we're not actually able to read all the cues that we're used to. But interestingly enough, it's also partly a result from seeing our own faces all day long. You know, when you think about pre-COVID and all day being in meetings, you never really saw yourself. But on video, you see yourself all day long. So if you feel like you're experiencing video fatigue, I would encourage you to test out putting a Post-it note over your own face on the screen in meetings and see if you might feel differently. And then now I think it's always been this way, but now more than ever, I think we all realize that there are most definitely some meetings that could have been an email. All right, so when you're planning your meetings, this is kind of a back to the basics thing, but just only invite people who need to be there. Make sure that there's clear goals and intentions for the meeting. Ask someone to take notes and send a summary of the decisions and action items that were made during the meeting. And consider shooting for shorter, like maybe 30-minute meetings to see if you can get the same accomplished in a shorter amount of time. And then as we're starting with video and phone meetings, there's some fun ways that we can do it to really foster gratitude and that rest repose within our team. So if you're on Zoom, you can use the chat. Or if you're on phone, it could be like an icebreaker opening, but what's one thing you're grateful for? What are the 3 things that have, the 3 best things that have happened this week? What are you most looking forward to? Or what's your personal weather forecast? So just get creative and leverage the tools that you are using. So I'd love to pause here for a moment because I think the sharing is super valuable right now to see what have you found within your organization that works or doesn't work related to remote meetings. I'll pause for a second, and Carrie, you can help me with this.
Absolutely. So any raised hands?
What's working or not working for you?
Or you could type something in the Q&A box. Yes, Christina Shepard.
Hi, I'm Christy Shepard with Planning Plus, and one of the challenges that I have found, whether I'm working with my colleagues or working with clients or even doing some of my Zoom cocktails with friends, is there's so much nuance that goes into meetings before and after, who gets there early, body language, the after conversations, and particularly in some conferences that are going online as well, is that interpersonal it's better than we've ever had before, having the online meeting and access, but there's still that level. It's very 2D and not 3D. And so I just find that we're doing the best that we can, but there's still limitations. And as you know, what we do, we work with people. And when you can't really be with people it doesn't always come through. So that's just one of the things we found, is that you can only get so close and so real.
Christy, it's great to hear your voice. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you, Erin. This is fantastic.
Anyone else?
Thank you, Christy. We do have a comment from Mark Lindenlaub, who says, with large groups, designate a host to moderate the meeting, call on people, etc., like you're doing today.
Awesome.
Looks like that's it.
Okay, great. Okay, so the last big concept I want to bring forward, and this may be for some of us more of an introduction, is coaching, right? I really want to encourage you as a leader or a manager to also become a coach. During times of uncertainty, most of us do what's comfortable and what's familiar. We respond to questions, we give instruction, we tell people what to do. And in times of stress, we move quickly, we react quickly, and it makes us forget the possibility about asking questions and coaching our leaders rather than solving all of their problems for them. So what does coaching do as a manager? When we think about being a coach as a leader or a manager, it fosters empowerment, it creates buy-in, it increases confidence, and it helps develop our leaders. So consider responding to your team's questions and seeking input using a coaching framework. There's a ton of them out there. One of my favorite frameworks is by Ron Ernst, a local coach who wrote the book Real-Time Coaching. His framework uses 4 questions as the foundation for coaching. What do you want? What are you doing? Is what you're doing getting you what you want? And what's your plan? Now, of course, it doesn't have to be robotic. You know, it doesn't have to be going through all 4 of them in a row or in that same tone or even with the same language. You can adapt them, and the book actually helps you to figure out what are the many different ways you can ask each of these 4 questions based on the style of the person that it is that you're leading. So it can be pretty casual and just, okay, well, what have you tried so far? Well, how's that working out for you? What are some other things that we can consider? There's another model called the GROW model that you can, research online, and there's many, many books about this as well, which help people to focus on, okay, what's the goal, the reality, the options, and the way forward. But really, no matter whether you follow a full coaching framework or just start asking more questions, the key is to try to avoid jumping in to solve everyone's problems right away. When we solve problems for our team, it not only leaves us vulnerable to solving things from a singular point of view, but it also ensures that we will have to do it over and over and over again. So I really like the idea of just picking a couple or a handful of questions that you can fall back on when you're talking with someone or a group or your team as a whole, and you feel tempted to come up with a solution right away. Here are some of my favorite coaching questions. When people are super overwhelmed, which a lot of us are right now, what's one small change that we can make today that will help us tackle this? For pessimism, well, what do we learn from this? Where can we go from here? How can we apply this when things get back to normal? And for those stuck in the weeds who can't really see the strategy or the higher, bigger picture, just ask them, start to coach them and help them to begin thinking about things through the lens of how would you describe the big picture of what's happening right now? So there's loads of books and internet resources about coaching, but you don't have to be an expert to try this strategy. Next time a staff member reaches out to you, consider what questions you can ask them. Odds are that they already have the answers inside of them. You can also use coaching questions to talk to your team about this graphic. This graphic is about who do I want to be during COVID-19. This has been a favorite graphic in coaching sessions and webinars. We looked at it in the self-leadership part of the series through the lens of who is it that I want to be during this time. But you can review this graphic as a team and reflect on the many different ways that your team can choose to show up right now. And you can explore the choices that we can make to move from one zone to the other. One simple exercise would be to share this graphic with your team and ask them what resonates with you about these zones right now. Where have you seen yourselves lately? Where do you want to be? Where does our team need to be to execute our mission? And how can I help you get to where you want to go? Also, and this is super important as well, is to take time to know the specific ways that you have seen your team showing up in the higher zones and celebrate and honor them for that. As the leader of a team in times of stress, it's our job to remind the team that we're not going to let fear win. We aren't going to stay in the fear zone. We as a team are pivoting, learning, growing, and focusing on what we need to do to be the best people that we want to be. Author Roy Bennett said it really well, and I think it bears importance to remind ourselves of this when we're leading in times of stress. It's all a choice, right? Attitude, optimism, kindness, whatever choice you make makes you, so choose wisely. And the message that I want each of you to walk away from our time together today is that as a leader during this difficult and challenging time, you are doing better than you think. Thank you all kindly for your time today and for coming together to learn a little bit more about leadership in times of stress. I'd love to hear from a couple people about what you're taking away from our time together today, and I'm also happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions for Erin? Christy Gillespie said, no question, but very nice job, Erin.
Thank you. It's been my pleasure. I'm happy to stick around. If people do have questions, I can stick around for a couple minutes. I know some people probably have to scoot off to something else, but I'll stick around.
April McMiller says, I'm taking away the encouragement to stay positive.
Thanks for sharing. It's sometimes hard to remember, but super important.
And just a reminder that we will send out the slides later this afternoon for those of you who are interested in them. Nicholas Bachhorst says, it was interesting to hear how anxiety controls our decision-making process. It is more important than effort to extend grace to ourselves and others.
Yes, buckets of grace.
Dr. Sharon Ligon says, thanks for today, Erin. Great information. Mark Lindenlaub says, nice tips on restructuring meetings and keeping them focused. Some good feedback. Well, if we have no more questions for Erin, then, we have one question here from Christy Gillespie. Was wondering what you are hearing, what your thoughts are on more remote working than ever before, and how do you think it will impact team building? Good question.
That is a great question. I think that people are learning how to adapt to the online environment. And I am seeing a lot of teams continue with group and team coaching despite it being virtual. So I think I don't know if I have an exact answer to that, but I do think that we're all having to learn how to adapt and engage virtually, which is really new and different for all of us. So I think it's pushing a lot of us to our growth edge, which also can be a stress trigger. So I think it's all connected.
On behalf of Prosperity Indiana, I want to thank each and every one of you for participating in this morning's webinar. Please join us next Tuesday, May the 26th, for Keeping Your Workforce Healthy and in Service. We will have Kimball Richardson of Community Health Network Behavioral Health as our guest presenter. As recovery from the COVID-19 begins to emerge, the health and safety of team members remains a high priority. Join us as we delve into the world of emotional support for teams and the role of supervisors. So thank you, everyone, and have a great week. And hopefully we'll see you again next Tuesday. Goodbye, everyone.